This is Play-by-Playcast,
Is that faster than a Greyhound?
the podcast about play-by-play guys, for play-by-play guys, by, I'm told, a play-by-play guy.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Now here's the host of Play-by-Playcast, Tom Bodett. Wait, the Motel 6 guy?
We'll leave the light on for you.
No, Joel Godet.
Joe Godet.
Joel.
Joel?
Joel, with an L.
Okay, here's your host, Joel Godet.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
All right, let's get back to work. Thanks as always for the subscribe, the stream, the download, however you're tuning in to this here podcast. My name is Joel Godet, and this is the podcast about play-by-play broadcasters for play-by-play broadcasters, hosted by a play-by-play broadcaster. It's a professional development podcast that dives into the tips, tricks, experience, stories, process, and preparations of some of the biggest and best play-by-play announcers in the business. You can find this podcast on social media, at PXPcast on Twitter, or you can hit me up at Joel Godet, JoelGodett, or shoot me an email, jgodett at bsu.edu. Our guest today is the voice of the Missouri Tigers. Mike Kelly joins us. He's been the voice at Mizzou since 1991-1992, the 1991-1992 academic year when Mike Kelly took over. Since then, has gone on to become a staple in radio, in Missouri sports radio, in Missouri sports culture, and has been inducted into the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame as well. He was inducted in the 2017 class. A warning in advance this week. This is one of our wonkier podcasts that we've produced in a while. Now, the purpose of this pod is to really dive in to the nitty-gritty, to break down the craft side of play-by-play and talk about the mechanics, and as we say off the top, process and preparation and you know, the how and why of what we do as play-by-play broadcasters. But this week in particular, I was just in a different kind of mood in terms of diving into the mechanical side of things. So heads up just off the top, this is a very mechanical episode. It gets down and dirty into the details of exactly how Mike perceives this business and this craft and this art form. And part of that is, picking his brain, and part of that is just kind of where my brain in particular was this week in the last couple of weeks. You know, we're halfway through football season, and I've listened to every Ball State football radio game on repeat after each of the last 6 weeks, and there's been a couple of different things that I've wanted to work on and wanted to fix and wanted to chip away at, and being honest, we address some of those questions and some of those things on this podcast. At the end of the day, that's what this forum truly is a chance to sit down and talk about those things with announcers and get their opinions and get their perspectives and see how it works to help me in some senses, and then also hopefully in a lot of senses help everyone else out there listening as well. So some questions on this episode that kind of dive into some things that have been top of my mind listening back to my own stuff over the past couple of weeks or so, with now half of football season still laid out in front of me. So just a warning off the top, this is one of our kind of nerd alert, more nerd alert episode podcasts when it comes to the actual details of play-by-play, and I hope you'll enjoy that. Very much is the case about next week's episode 2, when Dave Hunziker stops around, the voice of the Oklahoma State Cowboys. So with that as the preface and the foreground, let's not waste any further time and dive right into those details on this week's episode of the pod. And it starts with, well, the early times for Mike Kelly. What he first fell in love with about play-by-play, what he loved about this craft and this business then, and what he still loves about it now, what keeps him going every single day. Mike Kelly joining us here on PXPcast.
The opportunity to have a connection to the game is sincerely the reason why I do what I do and the path that I chose. I was an athlete growing up in high school and played basketball for 2 years, in college, and always wanted to find an opportunity to work somewhere close to the game. Played football in high school, played football growing up all as a child. And, just the love of the two sports was something that always attracted me to, again, trying to find the connection. I didn't want to coach. I had an opportunity to get into coaching at one point in time, but didn't want to do that. And growing up in the St. Louis area, I grew up in a small community across the river from St. Louis, Dupo, Illinois, D-U-P-O, and it's about 4 miles south of East St. Louis, and so about 6 miles south of the city. My dad was a huge KMOX fan, and he would pick me up from whether it be high school football practice or basketball practice or track or whatever. On his way home from work, he would pick me up, and he would always have KMOX on. And so, growing up listening to Cardinal games and listening to, Jack Buck and Mike Shannon or Jack and Harry and Bob Starr doing St. Louis Cardinals football or University of Missouri football, and Dan Kelly doing the St. Louis Blues, and a young guy back in the 70s by the name of Bob Costas doing the Spirits of St. Louis on radio. Those were voices that became a part of my childhood and a part of my formative years. And so I was always intrigued by how they got into the positions that they were able to put themselves into. And it was because of that that I eventually chose, to pursue that as a career. When I went to college, I thought I was going to be an attorney. I really thought I wanted to practice law. But, a couple of years of college classwork, and maybe not being really excited about being in the classroom, I opted for something else, and broadcasting kind of became a natural fit.
What were your influences, or what was the influence on you of hearing guys like Bob Costas? And then early in your career, I know Joe was one of your first partners, but, being around Jack Buck, what about what they did became important to you and helped shape what you became as a broadcaster early on, and I guess is carried through now?
Their ability to paint the picture of what was taking place either on the baseball diamond or, in Bob's case, on the basketball court. The connection that they had with both individual teams and with the fan bases of those teams was also something that was, to me, very intriguing. Jack was a great teacher. Aside from being a wonderful human being and a terrific person, he was a great teacher. You mentioned Joe, and Joe was my first color analyst when I started doing Mizzou basketball during the 91-92 season. And Jack would see the two of us in the office, and Joe was, fresh out of Indiana University and had done some Louisville Cardinal play-by-play on radio with Jim Kelch. Jack used to refer to us as the two fledglings. When are you two fledglings going to start your career? To which now I use as kind of a line is that, one of us is still fledgling. The other one's had quite a career. So, just little things that Jack would tell you along the way. People don't care about what you think about the call or what you think about the officials doing the game. The people listening to your game want to hear you call the play. So it doesn't matter what the score is. Doesn't matter who makes the play. Call the play, because you don't know who's listening on the other end And so the level of excitement, if the play deserves it, should be equal to the listener who's listening to you on the radio, because you're the objective observer who's calling the play. Things like that. I mean, you remember that right away. He had another line, which is true in our business too. Why are you there? You're there to get paid. So he'd say, keep a $100 bill in your wallet, pull it out next time you get bored doing a game, and put it in front of the microphone, because it reminds you why you're there, to get paid. So, just little subtle things like that along the way, make you appreciate the position that you have, but also give you, I think, a great message in terms of, you don't know who's on the other end. You don't know who's listening to your broadcast. Yeah, I mean, we think it's, if it's a Ball State game, you think it's Cardinal fans. If it's Missouri games, you think, well, Missouri fans are listening. Well, in this day and age, right, with the different platforms in which the games are available on, I think you get a variety of people that are tuned in. And so call the play, because that's what the listener wants to hear. And so those are some of the things I learned from. And as I call him Mr. Buck, call him that until the end. In fact, I did a Cardinal game with him, and I sat down with him. He said, "Remember, it's not Mr. Buck tonight; it's Jack." I said, "Okay, thanks, sir. I appreciate it." So, anyway,
and then you called him Mr. Buck anyway. There's that.
No,
Okay.
I called him Jack.
Okay.
But I did at the end of the game. It was the Cardinals. I think they were playing the Padres, and Jack had a line at the end of every Cardinal game where he'd say, "That's a winner." And unbeknownst to me, with 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth inning, or 2 outs in the top of the ninth inning, he says to the listeners, he says, "Mike Kelly will bring you the final out." Well, fortunately for me, I think it was a ground ball hit to Ozzie Smith that he then threw across the diamond to Pedro Guerrero at first base. And then I said, and as my friend Mr. Buck would say, that's a winner. So I did get it in there, I guess. So anyway.
You talked about fan connection in there, too, and I want to go back to that. And I've actually never asked this question on this podcast before, and I'm curious your thoughts on it. From the standpoint of, obviously fans connect with what we do and who we are and the product that we put out there in this business and in this craft. Why do you think that fans latch on to broadcasters in the way that they do, and I guess to certain ones in the way that they do? Because you'll always talk to people in markets and they'll love one guy not like another guy. What is it about what we do that can endear or unendear people to you? And I guess what's the approach that you take the right way so that it's not like everybody's trying. You're not going into this so that people like you, but obviously you want people to enjoy what they're listening to. Why people latch on and how you can get in that right boat.
Right. Well, I think we all as broadcasters with the listener develop a level of credibility as you move throughout your career. I would hope. I mean, 2 weeks ago against Georgia, it was my 300th consecutive Missouri football game, each game since the start of the 94 season. And the only reason why I mention that is that I would hope that time span has served as an opportunity for me to build a level of credibility with the Missouri fans, whether it be because of the consistency, showing up for work, and hopefully in my work, consistency that builds. But I think the other thing too is that I think we as broadcasters, particularly play-by-play people, develop a relationship with the listener because you're at every game, because they know that most of us doing shows with coaches develop a relationship with the staffs. And I think that there's a level of trust that comes with those relationships that you've built, and there's a trust that naturally then occurs between you and the listener. Now, Does everyone who listens to Missouri football like Mike Kelly? I guarantee they don't. I guarantee they don't. So I have no control over that. But that's part of what's, I think, in a little bit the uniqueness of the business and the profession that we've chosen. You know, my full-time job is in the insurance industry. I'm a senior vice president with the insurance firm Huntley McGee in St. Louis. You know, we work with large and small commercial clients. We've got clients in 50 states. We've got clients that operate in about 60 countries around the world. But my success from a sales standpoint is very easy to measure, very tangible. Numbers dictate whether I've had a good year or a bad year from a sales perspective, right? In our business, in this thing we call broadcasting and this hobby as it's become for me, from the very beginning, your success is really dictated by a subjective analysis of either your voice or your work. Someone along the line said, you know, Joel, you sound pretty good. I think you need to become the voice of Ball State. You know, for me, again, the opportunity to work in this position was because along the line, somebody thought that I sounded good for whatever reason. And to me, that's another unique thing about these opportunities is that, you know, you initially get your start because somebody likes what you sound like or likes the way you describe something. And hopefully for all of us that results in the ability to stay in that position for a long time. But in terms of winning over fans, I don't know I don't know that you can prevent someone from not liking the way that you sound or the way that you our catchphrase or something like that. I don't know how to overcome that. I really don't. Because again, it's very subjective, and you're dealing with a number of different personalities and individuals. And to somebody, they may hate my voice. You know, they may hate the way that I describe Missouri football. I can't do anything about that. All I can do is try to do my best possible job every time I sit down.
Well, that being said, what is the best possible way to describe Missouri football? If you had to sit down and go back to the Jack Buck quote of "just call the game," football in particular, because that's the season we're in. What is perfect is a tough word, but what is exceptional play-by-play? What is really good when you turn on the radio, or if you're listening back to yourself? What makes you feel like you had a good day?
Well, I think if the listener can see the field of play as they're listening to the game and can understand the description that your words are providing to them in a manner that has a change in inflection, a change in tone, and either an increase in enthusiasm or a decrease in enthusiasm because of what's taking place on the field, then I think you've drilled it. I mean, you know, there have been times where people come up to me, well, how'd you think you did on that play? Well, I don't know. I mean, I really don't. It's not mine to judge. It's really that of the listener to judge. And, you know, somebody asked me, you know, a few years ago, I was blessed to be inducted into the state of Missouri's Sports Hall of Fame. And somebody said, well, how would you want to be remembered? And I said, as someone that showed up to do their job, someone that cared for others, and hopefully at the end of the day, somebody that got it right. Yeah, I think that's just kind of, if you will, kind of a thumbnail sketch of what I think it is. I mean, you know, try to do it to the best of your ability. Try to, you know, understand that you have a broad audience that's out there. Understand that every play deserves the same amount of attention and focus as the play before it and the play after it, and just stay locked in. And you know, sometimes it's hard, right? You got a lot of things going on inside a booth. I mean, we've got, you know, not only an analyst but a producer, an engineer. We've got two spotters. We've got a statistician. There are a lot of hands flying at times.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, it's hard not to be distracted. But that's why you have to be able to, hopefully have that tunnel vision and to be able to stay focused on what's taking place on the field of play.
I had somebody call it to me the other day, mind before mouth syndrome too, and I feel like it's in this day and age where the sport, particularly in football, goes so quickly and you can see something develop much more so than any other sport that you broadcast. I'm thinking, in my case in point, back to last week, Ball State ran a double handoff flea flicker. And you can literally see the jet sweep come. You see it get handed off again. You see it get pitched back. And all these things are happening. And it's trying to find the ability to slow down the action in front of you so that you can actually call it without tripping over yourself. What's the best way that you find to keep yourself paced so that you can then deliver to somebody else what you're seeing and not get so wrapped up in the moment that it becomes difficult to actually deliver and describe?
That's a great question. I think to phrase it another way, what you're talking about is for the broadcaster to be able to selectively edit in their mind the words that they're going to use. And, I think a lot of it is sometimes understanding that we as broadcasters don't have to be, point on when something's happening, the guys at the 10, you don't have to, your call doesn't have to be that he's naturally at the 10. You want to keep pace with what he's going, but sometimes it's not bad to kind of pull back a little bit. And to be able to allow, I think, the natural flow of the game and the excitement of the crowd to maybe kind of come into play a little bit too. So, a pause here or there isn't a bad thing, but, and I think sometimes we have a tendency because we get so excited and want to describe to the audience everything that's going on that sometimes it's okay to just let it breathe a little bit, right? The way our system is set up, we've got a producer that is a part of the broadcast, and that he will read some of the in-game reads, and we have an engineer that gets panicked sometimes if there's dead air. And what I try to remind both of them is that it's not FM hot hit radio. You don't have to segue from one piece of music to the other. It's a natural event, and sometimes it's kind of enjoyable to maybe just have a little pause and listen to the band if they're playing, or maybe have a little pause and listen to whatever music that might be playing. It's okay. It's a long broadcast. It's in some cases 3.5, 3:45, depending on if the two teams are, teams like to spread it and throw it. So I hope I've answered that.
No, 100%.
Yeah.
You talked about inflection earlier, too, and I wanted to double back to that from the standpoint of, and again, this is one of those things where it happens in football, and again, particularly nowadays, because offenses go so quickly, and it gives this almost frenetic feel to a game at times. How do you manage that aspect of it from the standpoint of not sounding like it is so intense all the time, and then being able to differentiate when you do hit a big play? Because I feel like, personally, particularly the last couple of weeks when I've listened back to things, I'm like, gosh, I feel like I'm up a lot more than I should be, and then when someone hits a 30-yard pass, the gap between normal and large play is not what it should be because I feel like I'm up in the first place. And being able to kind of find that space between kind of talking voice and action voice.
Yeah, that is something I think we all deal with. And I think part of it is that maybe every play starts with you in one tone or in one moment and then kind of builds, right? And so I've always just tried to think that each play is and each drive is kind of like a building block, right, for the team, but also for you.
Yeah.
And you're building to whatever that eventual play may be. So that's how I've tried to just look at it is every play is a building block, and with you as the broadcaster, it starts here, but then it will either take you or it won't take you to that next level. So I've always tried to kind of, and I understand what you're saying, and part of it is, right, if you're in these positions, you probably like what you do, probably love what you do. And so it's easy to get excited about what you're doing. And during the course of a football game, I found myself, particularly early on in my career, you'd lose your voice in the fourth quarter because I didn't know how to manage it early on. And so I think that's part of it too, is you naturally learn how to manage voice quality and manage those moments when, it's excited. I mean, where you're excited. I've always appreciated broadcasters that have that natural excitement that comes to their voice, not that seems like it has to be manufactured. And I just think that that's something that develops over time with style and with pacing and with experience.
How much did you, I guess, originally listen back to your work, and how much do you still listen back now, and what do you listen for when you do that?
Don't listen to it as much as I used to. Used to listen to it a lot, but I hated the way I sounded. So I was like, "Oh my gosh, who wants to listen to this?"
I feel like we all do that, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I'll listen back to certain plays just to see, either how bad it was or did I capture it correctly. More than anything, just to, is there a better way I could have said something? So, but not nearly as much as I used to. I used to the point where it was probably a negative, right? Because I think the one thing too that we all have to understand is that when you talk for as long as a broadcaster will talk, particularly on a football Saturday or football Thursday or Friday or whenever the game is played, Sunday, you can't utter as many words as one will utter during the course of calling a game and not have a stumble or two. You just can't. It's natural, so I think once you get over that there's not going to be always a perfect game where you don't have either a mistake or a stumble or something like that. Once you get over that and can just relax and just call it, then guess what? The quality and I think your work improves too.
Do you have any favorite terminology that you like to use? That's one of my favorite things to ask people is descriptive phrases you've thought of. Yeah.
I picked this up. One of my first play-by-play jobs is that I did play-by-play for the University of Illinois women's volleyball team back in the mid-'80s. And actually learned how to do the games by sitting on the baseline of practice a couple of days before calling a NCAA regional between Missouri and USC in Lincoln, Nebraska. Sat there with an assistant coach, and he literally just walked me through the pace of the game and walked me through, some strategy and things like that. And I'm sure it was horrendous listening to it, but eventually our radio station in Champaign, WDWS, became the first station east of the Mississippi to carry every women's volleyball game home and road. And that dates back to the 1986 season. So, but what that sport did is it helped me with pacing. It helped me with the ability to selectively edit in my mind what I was doing. But I also learned the phrase pinballs. A ball pinballs off a defender, trying to dig the ball, pinballs off one defender, hits the other. And I've used that in basketball, pinballs off the rim. Trying to think of other ones that I've used throughout football and basketball. Pop flies, quarterback pop flies the ball. Rainbows is another one, to try and change it up between just heaves it downfield, slings it.
So I say downfield way too often too, by the way. So if you have any good ones there.
Pop, I'll say instead of downfield, I'll try to say like rainbows right sideline or pop fly right sideline.
Yeah.
Airs it out. one of the phrases that's probably been attached to me for quite a while since really the mid 90s, I guess. I have used the phrase "takes it to the house" quite a bit after scoring plays, and I used to always reserve it for just big touchdowns, and I probably I've tried to pull back maybe a little bit over the years with it, but I was at practice one day at Mizzou, and I was watching the defensive backs, and again, this is 1994, 95, and the defensive backs at that point in time were talking to each other, and pick that and take it to the house. And I was like, I kind of like that. And so I started using it. And so that's another one that I've used for a scoring run or catch and run, pick six, something like that. Those are a couple.
Gotcha. Here's the question to which there is no answer. What do you enjoy more, football or basketball?
Oh, I think there is an answer. Joel, I think there is an answer.
Okay.
And my answer to that question that has been asked many, many times is that I love the challenge that each one presents. With basketball, it's the pace, right? It's the pace of play. With football, it's the number of things that could go wrong on any play or the number of things that could happen on any play because of the 22 people that are on the field at the same time. So I don't think that's a cop-out answer. I think that's pretty good.
Is there a way that you keep track, by the way, of who's on the field at any given time in terms of those 22? Because I feel like there will be times where it's like, oh, I didn't realize that corner checked in, and it catches you by surprise. What are the ways that you check yourself on personnel and things of that nature?
I'm always trying, when I lay out and allow the color analyst to talk or our sideline reporter to talk, I'm always checking substitutions on both sides. But I also, using Spotter to hopefully, be able to keep track of that as well. And there are times that you miss somebody, you just do, but that's how I try to, is just each and every play, try to keep an eye on while they're talking of who's coming in and who's coming off.
Gotcha. I'll let you go on this note here, but who does great play-by-play to you today? Who do you enjoy listening to, and what about those people? Kind of bring it full circle. It maybe some of the same people. What about those people makes them excel at their craft?
I have always been a huge Wayne Larrivee fan. Going back to, the 1985 Super Bowl, I still have the cassettes. As a Bears fan who was living in Champaign at the time, I still have 5 cassettes from the Super Bowl when the Bears, destroyed the Patriots. I have always enjoyed Wayne's work. Very descriptive, very enthusiastic. And in the times that I have met him, I've always found him to be an unbelievable gentleman. I obviously have always been a fan of Bob Costas's work as well. Joe Buck, not only a good friend, but I think he's, from a television standpoint, I think Joe has taken that to a different level.
It gets a tremendously bad rap. I don't understand why people
that's just the day and age in which we live. Because of the influence of social media. Dan McLaughlin, who does locally here in St. Louis, the Cardinals. Play-by-play on Fox Sports Midwest, is not only one of my dear friends, but I just think he's tremendously talented. He has the ability and has about 6 or 7 different color analysts and seamlessly works them in and out each and every game. And it's just, it's remarkable the job that he does with the number of different individuals that he works with throughout the course of the season. And has become, for this generation, this fan base and generation of fan base, he's become, the Jack Buck of the St. Louis Cardinals. And so, there are so many gifted broadcasters. Mike Reese is one of my dear friends and a great mentor at SIU Carbondale. And Mike has always been a guy that I've always had the utmost respect for. Not only his pacing, his delivery, his descriptions, but also just, how much he loves what he does, and you can hear it each and every time that he's on the air. Really big fans of a lot of the guys that I encounter around the Southeastern Conference. Really big fan, and just it's been such an honor to get a chance to meet those guys since Missouri, shifted from the Big 12 to the Southeastern Conference. Too many to name, obviously. So,
I was saying, is that cool for you when you switch affiliations like that and you get to interact, meet, work with different guys, go to different places?
Well, and Joel, as I've gotten older, I'm kind of selfish, so I kind of like the warmer weather in the Southeastern Conference. I kind of like the different venues and seeing, this week we're at Williams-Brice Stadium in Columbia, South Carolina, terrific venue. Next week we go to Bryant-Denny Stadium. I've never called a game from Bryant-Denny, but my youngest daughter went to school in Alabama, so I've been inside the stadium as a fan on a few occasions over the course of the last 4 years. And so, so being able to see that, and to me, it's been the best of both worlds because you get to know obviously a lot of different venues with the Big 8 and the Big 12, and now to be in the SEC and get to meet all these different people and expand, if you will, not only your footprint, but you're just the number of friends and connections has been really, really special.
I was going to say, this is a third rail, but you probably miss going to Phog Allen, but it probably gets made up for when you get to have like bucket list things like Bryant-Denny, 12th man, and all that.
Yeah, I mean, hey, that's a cathedral, and I don't care what any Missouri fan says. I mean, Allen Fieldhouse in Lawrence, Kansas, is truly one of the treasures in college basketball. And the folks at Kansas have done a terrific job of keeping it relevant through the different changes and renovations that they've made through the years. And it was loved doing games there, really did. But also kind of dig going to Rupp Arena. That's been kind of fun too. So I've just. At the end of the day, the one thing people should know about me is that I'm the first one to tell you I've been really fortunate and very blessed to be in this position for as long as I've been here.
Mike, how do people find you and tune into the Tigers, or I guess track you down on social media and the like as well?
I am not on social media. I'm just not a big fan. I just think there's too much negativity. Yeah, so I just I tune it out. I mean, and the other thing I would say is, when I was on Twitter, it was because, of the news value. But then what we have, I think, all found out is that, when stories are reported, because of the urgency that people feel to get it on social media, most of the initial stories are incorrect. And so I just had enough of it and just kind of pulled the plug, and it's just not something that I enjoyed. So, MUTigers.com is Missouri's website. You can go on there and find our affiliates. In St. Louis, we're on AM 550 KTRS. I do a 2-hour talk show, though, on Sunday mornings on KMOX in St. Louis, and on every Sunday between 10 and noon. That would be a couple places.
That's Mike Kelly joining us here on PXPcast since 1991-92, the voice of the Missouri Tigers, and 1994 when he took over the play-by-play role as well, in addition to his basketball duties. If there's one thing that sticks with me, and again, this is just kind of where my head has been at over the last couple of weeks of play-by-play, but when he talked about treating each play like a pyramid and starting kind of at the bottom for each one and building. And then the next play comes around and you're back at the pyramid. You're back at the foot. You're back at the foundation. And you're setting that table again, and then you build. And sometimes one will build higher than the play before it. Sometimes one will build higher than the play after it. But at the end of the day, you always come back to the beginning of that pyramid and set the table with your inflection, with your volume, etc., etc., etc. Really going to be top of mind for me as the Cardinals, Ball State, takes on Northern Illinois coming up on Saturday. it's that time of year where you're just kind of excited to get back to it. The one thing I hate about football season is, like, it's such a long week. You play the game, and then you've got all week leading up to your next game. And that tension and the excitement and the, oh my goodness, can we just do this, continues to build up all week. Like baseball season, you play every day. Basketball season, you play twice a week. Football, though, you build up to this emotion of what you finally get to do on Saturday. So looking forward to what the Cardinals have in store and how it goes on the air with Northern Illinois on Saturday. Until then, however, enjoy the rest of this episode and further episodes in our archive of PXPcast. And find us on social media as well. If you don't follow, give us a follow at PXPcast. Throw us a rating or review as well. And then we'll talk to you right back here next week when Dave Hunziker is our guest, the voice of the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Until then, my name is Joel Gadet. This is PXPcast, and we are out.